The difference between mastering a skill in a few weeks and struggling for months is not determined by innate talent. It is determined by the system used. Two learners can begin with identical resources, yet one achieves competency rapidly while the other succumbs to tutorial hell. The fast learner employs a structured, repeatable four-stage loop designed to systematically eliminate ignorance and accelerate practical application. This framework is a precise method for collapsing months of slow, unstructured learning into focused, measurable progress. To understand this framework, we must first establish the central conceptual tool, the blind spot matrix. This matrix maps the learner's relationship with knowledge across two dimensions, awareness and ability. The vertical axis represents awareness, knowing that something exists. The horizontal axis represents ability, knowing how to execute it. Quadrant 1 contains the known knowns. These are the skills the learner is aware of and proficient in. This is the goal state. Quadrant 2 holds the known unknowns. The learner knows the concept exists, for example, knowing that database normalization is necessary, but does not yet possess the ability to perform it. This is the active curriculum. Quadrant 3 is the unknown knowns, information the learner may have absorbed passively but cannot consciously articulate or apply. This quadrant is largely irrelevant to active skill acquisition. The critical area is Quadrant 4, the unknown unknowns. This is the blind spot. It contains every piece of information, every necessary concept, and every best practice the learner does not even know they need to know. The unknown unknowns are the primary source of frustration and stagnation in learning. The entire objective of this four-stage framework is to systematically drag every vital element from the blind spot of Quadrant 4 into the active curriculum of Quadrant 2, and then through practical application into the mastery of Quadrant 1. Stage 1 is illumination. The sole mission in this stage is high-velocity information gathering, specifically targeted at identifying the unknown unknowns. This process must be highly structured to prevent analysis paralysis. The output of Stage 1 is a minimum viable information list, not a comprehensive knowledge base. The process begins by creating a structured gap spreadsheet. The first column defines the desired skill. The second column defines the core function or job the skill must perform. The third column, titled Gap I Can Name, is the most important. If the learner cannot articulate a specific gap, they must input the phrase unknown unknown and move on. The next step involves leveraging credible, objective sources. The focus is on peer-reviewed review articles or high-quality data-backed industry reports published within the last 5 years. Avoid introductory blogs or general tutorials at this initial stage. The citation list of these sources is exported and sorted by descending citation count. Any document above the 75th percentile of citations is designated a starter source. This filtering mechanism ensures that the initial intake is focused on foundational principles validated by the broader expert community, minimizing exposure to incorrect or superseded information. Finally, the learner extracts the minimum viable note from each starter source. This note is limited to one sentence summarizing the single first action the source recommends. If the skill is advanced data science, the note might be master the concept of feature engineering before selecting a model. If the skill is oil painting, the note might be focus on blocking in large value shapes before adding detail. The learner stops the illumination stage immediately upon collecting 10 such distinct actions. Research indicates that additional browsing beyond this point introduces diminishing returns and significantly delays the transition to the next, more impactful stage. The goal is not knowledge saturation, but the creation of a clear map out of the blind spot. Stage 2 is deliberate intake. Having identified the essential principles that bridge the knowledge gap, the learner now converts these 10 actions into a micro-curriculum. This stage is dedicated to building a solid theoretical foundation using active high-retention learning techniques. The gap spreadsheet is expanded into a curriculum tab. Each of the 10 identified actions is listed in the first column, arranged from simplest to most complex. The second column documents the single core principle that explains why the action works. For instance, if the action is use version control systems, the principle is version control ensures nonlinear development and state recovery. The third column is reserved for the exact diagram, equation, or code snippet provided by the source material that visually represents the concept. The key to Stage 2 is maximizing retention through the generation affect. Studies consistently show that memory retention for verbatim notes halves within 48 hours, while retention for information actively generated and paraphrased by the learner remains high over the long term. Therefore, the learner reads the source material once, immediately closes it, and then attempts to paraphrase the core principle aloud in their own words. This verbal explanation is transcribed into the fourth column. The source is then reopened only to check for accuracy against the original material. This cycle of read, close, generate, and check is repeated until the transcribed paraphrase in the fourth column matches the original concept's meaning but shares 0 identical phrases. This forces the brain to internalize and structure the knowledge. Cognitive load is another critical factor. Novices experience a rapid drop in comprehension when the amount of new information processed concurrently exceeds their working memory capacity. To counter this, daily intake is capped at 4 principles. Overstacking the curriculum leads to superficial coverage and high attrition rates. Stage 2 concludes only when every principle in the list can be recited and explained from memory without reference to the source material. This ensures that the foundational knowledge is robust enough to support the practical challenges of Stage 3. Stage 3 is immediate construction and engineered failure. This is the application stage, where theoretical knowledge is transformed into applicable skill. The biggest threat here is tutorial hell, the state of perpetual consumption where the learner can follow instructions perfectly but cannot create independently. Stage 3 requires the learner to shift from replication to original construction, specifically by designing projects that are guaranteed to fail in one predictable way. The purpose of engineered failure is to tighten the feedback loop. When a project breaks predictably, the learner isolates the specific variable responsible, thereby cementing the connection between the theoretical principle and its practical consequence. For example, if the principle involves understanding the limits of a specific material, the project is to deliberately overload that material until it fails. The resulting failure provides a visceral, high-context lesson that is significantly more memorable than simply reading a cautionary warning. Cognitive science trials confirm that error-stamped memory traces last 2.4 times longer than traces built from correct-only examples. The learner selects the simplest principle that has been mastered in Stage 2 and designs a micro-project capped at 3 hours of focused work. The project must be designed to break based on a violation of that principle. The learner logs this process in a new section of the spreadsheet. Column E is titled Error Face, containing a screenshot or detailed description of the anomaly. Column F documents the exact line of code, brushstroke, or mechanical step that caused the break. Column G contains the single keyword or correction that fixes it. After 3 such projects, the learner owns a personalized lookup table mapping error signatures to remedies. This table becomes a faster, more relevant reference tool than any general textbook. To accelerate the debugging process and expose unknown edge cases, the project repository must be published publicly. Anonymous peer review on platforms utilizing upvoted threads has been shown to increase feedback speed by over 200% compared to traditional chronological comment sections. The learner iterates on the project until 2 consecutive reviewers who are strangers independently confirm the work is adequate for a junior level. Stage 3 concludes when half of the principles from the original 10-item list have been successfully transferred and validated through public, bug-free construction. Stage 4 is forced explanation. The final stage solidifies the skill and prepares the learner for the next cycle of advanced knowledge acquisition. This stage leverages the protégé effect, which demonstrates that learners who expect to teach score 25% higher on delayed recall tests than those who learn only for themselves. Teaching forces the learner to distill complexity into its simplest components. The learner selects the most recently transferred project and creates a 6-step checklist that a complete beginner could use to reproduce the final working result. Each step must be concise, fitting into a single tweet-length sentence. If a step overflows, the concept is still too dense and must be split or simplified. This compression process ensures maximum conceptual clarity. Next, a 5-minute screen capture video is recorded walking through the checklist and the final project. This video must be recorded in a single, unedited take. The one-take rule prevents perfectionism and forces fluency. The video is uploaded as an unlisted resource. For every 60 seconds of narration, the learner writes a one-sentence summary. If any minute cannot be summarized clearly, the corresponding segment contains conceptual fog and must be re-recorded. The time-boxed nature of this stage is crucial. The video is kept online for 48 hours with comments enabled. During this window, the learner must answer every question posed by viewers, using data-backed sources to justify the answer. The questions posed by beginners are invaluable, as they highlight residual unknown unknowns, the things the learner still doesn't know they don't know. After 48 hours, the video is deleted. The question list generated from the comments is exported into a new tab titled Cycle 2 Seeds. These seeds are fed back into Stage 1, initiating the next, more advanced loop of the framework. The entire 4-stage cycle, when maintained at a consistent velocity, typically moves a standard 10-item curriculum from zero awareness to competent application in 21 focused days based on meta-analytic data from self-reported skill sprints. The learner must maintain a daily velocity log. If the completion rate drops below 1 principle every 3 days, the project scope must be halved instead of increasing study hours. Scope reduction is the necessary mechanism to restore momentum without raising cortisol levels and driving burnout risk. The framework is a continuous, iterative loop. Each completed cycle widens the known-known quadrant, collapses the blind spot of unknown unknowns, and adds reusable debugging patterns to the learner's permanent toolkit. The grid is the GPS, the spreadsheet is the engine, and the public application loop is the fuel. By running this system tonight, the question of how you learned so fast will be answered with a data-backed system, not with wishful thinking or reliance on mythical